Folks, let me tell you, there's something big happening out there, and it's not getting nearly enough attention from our mainstream media. You've heard of the BRICS countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These nations are on fire economically, and it's about time everyone started paying attention. Just recently, on July 16th, the International Monetary Fund, which is no small player, dropped their latest World Economic Outlook report. And guess what? It's the BRICS that are stealing the show, not the old G7 countries we hear about all the time. Now, according to the IMF, from 2024 to 2025, these BRICS nations aren't just bouncing back from the global mess we've seen over the past few years. They are leading the charge in global growth. It's like they've turned on the engines while everyone else is still trying to figure out how to get off the runway. And it's not just a flash in the pan. The growth we're seeing here is built on some serious strategic moves and smart economic policies that these countries are rolling out. While countries like the USA, Japan, and those in Europe are wrestling with problems like aging populations and slow productivity, these emerging markets are just zooming ahead. The IMF's report is waving a big flag here, saying, look, the center of the global economy is shifting. That's right, shifting towards these dynamic economies of the BRICS. And it's not just about numbers and growth rates, it's about the future of global trade, investment, and even the big geopolitical chess game. Here's another kicker. The global inflation scene is looking up too. The IMF is predicting that headline inflation is going to drop to about 5.8% in 2024, and even lower to 4.4% in 2025. That tells you something about the impact of these countries' policies and how they're tackling supply-side issues head-on. So what's the takeaway here? We need to start thinking about what this means for us. The world's economic focus is shifting, and it's moving toward the BRICS. All right, let's dive deep into the big league, folks. The expanded BRICS now including power players like Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and Ethiopia. It's like the Avengers assembling with each bringing their unique strengths to the table. We're not just looking at a couple of countries doing well here. It's an entire bloc that's reshaping the global economic map. China and India, they're the heavy hitters in this group. China's cranking up its growth with a solid 5% in 2024, dipping slightly to 4.5% in 2025. Their secret sauce? A powerhouse manufacturing sector and a booming property market, not to mention their knack for pushing out exports like nobody's business. And while they're juggling some internal adjustments and global headaches, they've got a toolkit of policies ready to keep things steady. I have a simple favor to ask. If you're finding this discussion interesting, please give it a thumbs up. Your likes and comments mean a lot to us and help others find this content. If you haven't already, consider watching the whole video to support our channel. Your engagement is crucial and enables us to keep providing detailed analyses of global events. Thank you for being a part of our community. Now, there's a growth story worth telling. They've dialed up their forecast to a whopping 7% for both 2024 and 2025. This isn't just about tech and call centers. It's about a booming private sector, surging rural demand, and government cash splashing on big infrastructure. Sure, they've got their work cut out with inflation and those pesky global uncertainties, but India's got the fundamentals down pat. Over in Russia, things are a bit tighter, with growth expected at just 1.2% in 2024 and a slight bump to 1.5% in 2025. It's mainly their oil and gas keeping the engines running, especially with all the sanctions drama and the ups and downs of global energy prices. They're navigating through some choppy waters with their geopolitical dance, but they're hanging in there. Brazil's showing some spunk too, with their numbers looking better at 1.9% growth in 2024, and even better at 2.2% in 2025. It's a mix of bouncing back in agriculture and getting a boost from their service sectors. The road's a bit rocky with inflation issues and the political merry-go-round, but they've got a plan. And don't forget the new kids on the block. We've got the Middle Eastern powerhouses, Iran and Saudi Arabia, fueling up with their oil exports. The UAE's not putting all its eggs in one basket, diversifying like a pro into tourism and real estate. Egypt's spinning its wheels with textiles and farming, and Ethiopia is brewing up growth with their coffee sector. Iran is eyeing a modest 2% growth in 2024, and while that might not seem like a lot, considering their geopolitical hurdles and sanctions impacting oil exports, it's a testament to their resilience. They're working hard to diversify away from just oil, which is crucial if they want to keep that economic engine running smoothly in the long haul. Now, shifting gears to the UAE, they're looking at a healthier 4.3% growth next year. This isn't just oil money talking. It's their booming tourism sector, real estate, and a push into tech and infrastructure. They're crafting a blueprint for a post-oil future, and let me tell you, it's impressive. Over in Egypt, they're predicting a 4.5% rise. This growth is fueled by heavy investments in infrastructure and a rebound in tourism, which is huge for them. They've got their challenges, sure, like keeping debt under control and political waves from rocking the boat, but they're setting the stage for sustainable growth. Ethiopia is another standout, expecting a robust 5.3% growth, driven by their agricultural sector and infrastructural developments. Despite some serious internal challenges, they're making significant strides with governance and economic reforms. It's tough, but now let's pivot to the G7 economies, sort of like the old school club facing their set of 21st century challenges. Inflation is their big bogeyman, with central banks hiking rates to keep those rising prices in check. This tactic, while necessary, is squeezing economic activity, risking slower growth across the board. Energy is another battlefield. The G7 is gunning for a greener future, tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling down on energy efficiency by 2030. We're talking about phasing out coal and pumping cash into sustainable energy solutions. It's ambitious and absolutely crucial for hitting those climate targets. But here's the kicker. It needs a ton of international cooperation and investment to actually work. In contrast, while the G7 juggles inflation and energy transitions, the expanded BRICS bloc, with its fresh blood and dynamic economies, is making moves that could redefine global economic leadership. We're in a technological arms race here, and AI, along with semiconductor supply chains, are at the front lines. The G7 is dialed into this, making moves to ensure that AI development respects human dignity while we stay on the edge of innovation. And about those semiconductors, everyone's realized how crucial they are, right? The G7's not taking any chances, aiming to build up resilient supply chains to cut down on those risky dependencies that can really throw a wrench in our economic security. Geopolitical tensions? You bet they're a huge part of the playbook. With the tussle with China and Russia heating up, the G7 is strategizing to shield its economic interests. They're pushing for fair trade practices and trying to buff up global supply chains against any non-market antics. There's a big push to help developing countries get a fair shake in the global market, trying to make sure everyone's boat rises with the tide. Now, let's break down the forecast for the G7 economies according to the latest IMF scoop. Starting with the home front, the United States is looking at a growth rate of 2.6% in 2024, with a slight slowdown to 1.9% in 2025. Despite the headaches of high inflation and interest rates, the American economy is showing some real grit, thanks to strong consumer spending and a labor market that's just refusing to quit. But keep your eyes peeled. Tight monetary policies and the shadow of geopolitical uncertainties could shake things up, affecting how folks feel about spending and investing. Heading north to Canada, they're expecting growth at 1.8% in 2024 and 1.6% in 2025. The engines there are being fueled by solid domestic demand and a reviving energy sector, not to mention the government's not shy about opening its wallet. The challenge? Keeping inflation and interest rates in a sweet spot that doesn't sour consumer spending or investment vibes. Across the pond in the United Kingdom, growth's a bit more modest at 1.2% in 2024, ticking up to 1.4% in 2025. They've got some Brexit dust settling, which helps, and consumers are keeping the registers ringing. But inflation's biting hard, and the tight monetary policies, along with potential trade snags, could throw some curveballs their way. And then there's Germany, clocking in with a growth forecast of 1.1% in 2024 and looking better at 1.5% in 2025. They're shipping goods like there's no tomorrow and keeping those factory lines busy. Yet they're not without their share of headaches. Supply chain kinks and the roller coaster of energy prices could really test their mettle. Over in France, they're forecasting a growth of 1.3% in 2024 and a slight uptick to 1.5% in 2025. The French engine is getting a big boost from hefty public investments, especially in those buzzing green and digital sectors. And let's not forget the tourism sector bouncing back. But they've got to keep a sharp eye on inflation and some needed tweaks in the labor market to keep things humming along. Down in Italy, the growth outlook is modest but positive, 1.0% in 2024, climbing to 1.3% in 2025. They're riding the wave of structural reforms and reaping benefits from EU recovery funds, not to mention a nice rebound in both manufacturing and services. The challenges? A hefty public debt and the hurdle of pushing through necessary reforms to keep the momentum. And then there's Japan, with growth projections sitting at 0.7% for 2024 and a bump up to 1.0% in 2025. They're leveraging an accommodating monetary policy, cranking up fiscal spending, and seeing a recovery in domestic demand. However, they're grappling with an aging population and the tricky waters of global trade uncertainties, which could cap their long-term growth potential. In contrast to the relatively modest growth of the G7, the BRICS nations, with their freshly expanded lineup, are just barreling down the economic track. From manufacturing marvels to energy juggernauts and agricultural aces, these countries are not just surviving, they're thriving, showcasing a dynamism that's setting them apart on the global stage. While the G7 contends with the headwinds of high inflation, the tricky transition to renewable energy, and a lattice of geopolitical tensions, the BRICS bloc is leveraging its diverse economic strengths to chart robust growth paths. And that, my friends, wraps up our deep dive into the current state of global economics between the BRICS and the G7. Thank you for tuning in. If this rundown has given you some food for thought or you found it valuable, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and it helps keep these conversations going. Check out another video popping up on your screen right now. Stay informed, and as always, keep pushing for the truth.